Why you be all on my line about nothing? Why won't you go get you $1 or something? Dollar or something. $1 or something.
Recording live in the Conscious Creative Media Studios from somewhere in the middle of nowhere, North Carolina, you are listening to the world's greatest photography podcast with your host, Bill Howard.
Thank you, Scott, and you are listening to the world's greatest photography podcast, and I am your host, Bill Howard. Today we are with real estate photographer and videographer Gerald Bertram out of the Chesterfield, Virginia area, which is basically the greater Richmond area, I would guess, central Virginia. And he also has business up in northern Virginia he has a partner there. And you can find Gerald's work at bertramphotography.com, on Instagram at Bertram_photo, or on Facebook at Bertram Photography. And Gerald, segment 2, we were discussing kind of how many photos you would get. And you mentioned shooting at angles, and that typically is the way we shoot, and the same thing here. My goal is hit all 4 corners of a room if possible. If there's a room that's very symmetrical, whether it be the bedroom or sometimes the kitchen, or a great den with a vaulted ceiling, then I'll tend to shoot straight on. I guess, what are some of the techniques that you prefer to shoot is where I'm headed with this.
Sure, no problem. For me, it's really important to be able to, I think just like with any sort of visual medium, I'm telling the story of the home. And the best way I found to do that is to be able to show the way the home flows. So from where you walk in the front door, where the living room is located from there, or the dining room or something like that. And so the way that I'll do that is I make sure in most of the angles that I'm shooting the home that, so for example, if I'm shooting in the living room, I'm making sure that I'm shooting at an angle where the doorway or whatever that's into the next room is in the shot. It's important so that when they see, for example, if they're standing in their dining room, when a potential buyer is looking at it, they'll know, okay, the kitchen is right there, to the left or to the right, and there's the hallway that goes, to the family room, and there's where the stairway is located. So it's really important in whatever angles you shoot, that you're showing where you're sort of going to next. So when the homeowner's looking, when they're starting at your first image, they're basically flowing from downstairs to upstairs, and they have a nice, good flow, top to bottom, of what the house is like. So that's key for me.
When you're shooting, I'm sorry to interrupt. When you're shooting ambient, let's say we've got a kitchen with a opening into the dining room, but it's a separate room. It's not like a kitchen nook.
Yep.
Or a breakfast nook or whatever. It's a dining room, but it's just a large opening to it.
Mm-hmm.
When you're shooting flambient, and for those that are unfamiliar with flambient, that's a combination of several images, including one image or more that's shot with flash. And that's to kind of color correct and get the right exposure for everything. Do you shoot the kitchen with the flash and then also take another shot with the flash in the dining room so it doesn't appear to be a dark tunnel?
Yep, absolutely. Sometimes I can get away with my ambient shot since I shoot with lights on. If that next room is well lit, sometimes I can get away with just that ambient exposure that I took in the kitchen will be enough to blend in that other room, and it'll look, fairly properly exposed. And that's just sort of, I'm eyeballing it when I hit the shutter. I'll look at that ambient shot and know I'll be able to tell if I can get away with it or not. A lot of times though, I'll go ahead and I, like I said, I have the remote with me. So I'll go and stand in that other room, get on the other side of the doorway or whatever, holding my flash with me and hit the shutter and get a flash shot in there. And I mean, it takes a little longer, but again, for a lot of the clients that my partner and I work with, it's important that nothing, no matter where you are, everything looks nice and bright and colorful. So Hey, man, you there?
Yeah, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
All right. Mine cannot find my camera now, so I don't know what's going on there. Are you okay?
I'm good, man. I can hear you. That's all that matters.
Did you finish your statement?
Who knows? I finished it on my side. I never stopped recording. In fact, I'm still going.
Okay.
So you can be able to cut this.
Perfect. When you finish your statement, then I'll kind of go into the next question. I can bounce this through.
So let me just finish up. Let me finish what I'm saying here, so you have a nice, clean edit here.
Gotcha.
So with the clients that my partner and I are working with in Northern Virginia, it's really important that no room, even if it's just a company room to the side, everything has to look bright and clean. So if it's necessary, if I can't pick it up with that ambient exposure, I'll go ahead and pop a flash off in that room. So yeah.
We're here today with Gerald Bertram of Bertram Photography. He is a real estate photographer and videographer. And editor. He's got 2 locations, if you count his partner, in Northern Virginia, as well as in Central Virginia around the Richmond area. And we haven't discussed the videography part yet. You were talking about the flows of the rooms. How do you do the flow of the video? Do you start outside, going around the house, come up to the door, and then kind of enter and go room to room, or what's the best way?
Yep. We tend to, of course, it depends on when I've gotten on site. If I'm there in the morning where the light's the best, I'll make sure I get the exterior stuff done first and then move inside. So most of the time I end up shooting the outside stuff first, then move inside. But sometimes that's flip-flopped and I'm waiting for better light to come or the clouds to move, and I'll go ahead and shoot inside first. Primarily, I know the popular thing these days is running through with a gimbal. I haven't gotten there yet, so I'm still pretty much shooting with my slider. So I'll eventually get into it. I have one. I'm trying to practice with it, but that also comes back to the issue I was talking about before, having some back problems. Running around with a gimbal all day is not very easy on the back. But I'm working on it, trying to strengthen those muscles, and eventually I'll start doing more. I've started sprinkling some in a little bit, my partner as well. But primarily it's a lot of slider shots for the inside, and then outside a little bit with the slider there as well. But of course, the drone as well, which if you're doing exterior video, you better have a drone.
I was going to ask about that. Did you do aerial work as well? And as far as your aerial, both stills and video, what I tend to do may not be what everybody else does. I tend to go about between 12 and 15 feet high, depending on the size of the house, to kind of get a little bit of a down angle. It also depends on if there's trees in the front yard, that type of thing. But I also like to send one high and try to get a straight down shot like you would see on Google Maps. Is that the same type thing you kind of attempt to do?
Yeah, I do. I definitely will get a few fairly high up. Some of the agents like to have an opening in the video, sort of an establishing shot of where the house is in relation to the other houses, what the neighborhood's like. Especially videos would tend to get done with the more higher end homes. And a lot of those might be like, say, waterfront properties, on the Potomac or something. So having a nice big establishing shot with a drone looks really nice. I don't, other than that sort of establishing shot, don't really go up too high. Like you said, just, a little bit above roof level or something like that. But more important, and this is the same even if I'm shooting with the slider, is making sure that I have foreground elements that will add some interest to the shot, because even if you're on a slider, moving side to side, if you're some distance back from the house, it's gonna almost look like nothing's happening at all. You need that foreground element to sort of slide by at the same time, even when you're flying the drone, have something have it going by something in the
Shrubbery,
foreground, adds more interest to the
bird
shot.
feeder, whatever.
Whatever. Okay. Yeah, absolutely. Sometimes we get lucky and we'll have like little pergolas or something, so we can kind of fly through those and make for some really interesting shots. But importantly, inside or outside, make sure you have something in the foreground because, for example, if I'm shooting a big kitchen, I can't just go into the corner, hit the slider, and go because it's not going to really look like much. So I'll come in tighter and maybe have the camera on the slider right on the other side of the island where there's a nice vase or something like that. So that can kind of move to the side as you're panning across and you see, the way the cabinets are looking or the oven, fridge, whatever might be nice that you're trying to convey in the rooms.
So you're looking kind of like for either a parallax type effect or for a reveal.
Absolutely. Yeah, because just a plain wide shot on video that's moving side to side or forward or back, it's boring. There's not much is happening at that wide of an angle that you tend to shoot at. So unless you have something in the foreground, it would be a really boring shot.
Now on stills, I'm assuming you shoot either f8 or f11.
Yep. Primarily
on video. Do you change your focus? Like if let's say you're in a kitchen and you're doing the slider and you're at a cabinet like an island,
mm-hmm.
Do you have the focus on that? And then as you reveal where the stove and the fridge are, you change the focus?
Sometimes I will. So for photos, I tend to be, like you said, somewhere anywhere between about f8 to f11. Usually around ISO 400 or something like that for the stills. When I switch over to video, I've got to open it up because, with the shutter speeds, trying to maintain that 180-degree rule where you're, you want to have your shutter speed. If you're shooting at 1/50th, your shutter speed at 1/50th of a second, you want to be shooting at about, somewhere in that general area. So you need to open up your aperture a bit so that the room can brighten up because you don't have shutter speed to rely on. I will tend to drop down depending on the lens I'm using. Sometimes I may go, if I'm using the 16 to 35, I might drop it all the way down to 2.8 and then focus on, whatever's the most interesting point, or even, occasionally might even focus out to infinity so I get almost everything in there. But occasionally, if I can find something that's really interesting in the foreground and do basically a focus pull on that, because the Panasonic cameras are fairly decent. I can actually, could even leave that in autofocus mode as it moves. It can slowly transition the focus out of there. Otherwise, if I'm on the slider, it's almost impossible to kind of reach over and do a manual focus pull on the lens, or, if you have a focus puller on the lens, it can be a little bit more complicated. But again, even when shooting video, I've got to get in and out of that house as fast as possible. So I tend to not be able to flex my artistic muscles as much when I'm shooting at home. I got to get a nice looking shot as quickly as possible and get out of their hair.
Well, you are listening to the World's Greatest Photography Podcast, and we're with guest Gerald Bertram of Gerald Bertram, or of Bertram Photography. I need to rephrase that.
There you go.
And don't look up Gerald Bertram Photography. You won't find it.
There might be some different ones out there, but yeah, that
exactly.
won't be me.
You mentioned you're working with a gimbal and trying to get used to that part of it. And I'm going to go two places with this, actually. One is I've noticed that do you know Peter McKinnon on YouTube?
I sure do. Oh, yeah.
I have seen a lot of real estate photography videos now using a lot of his techniques where they do the speed ramp. They'll have the shot come up to the door, speed ramp it into. Okay. Not the B-roll type stuff.
No. People don't get, like, photographers love to do that kind of stuff because it's cool, it's flashy, it's interesting. The person that you're shooting these videos for, taking these pictures for, is not the type of people that is going to enjoy that kind of video work. Honestly, it needs to be fairly boring. If we're working on a video for a house that's $10 million in Northern Virginia, that's not going to be a 28-year-old kid who thinks that kind of look is cool. It's going to be someone probably in their 50s or older who are looking for stately, who are looking for beautiful. They just want to see very simple movement, to see as much of the room as possible. And I know you've seen a video too that I've worked on before. And a lot of my shots are just simple pans back and forth, or occasionally a slide back and forth. That's because the agent wants that. They want to see as much of the area as possible, because that's what a prospective buyer wants to see. They could care less if you're coming in at 100 frames per second and slow way down and then speed back up and shoot over that. That means nothing. It's cool fluff for photography nerds. Potential homeowners don't want to see that stuff.
And I haven't even asked you this question yet, and I probably should have early on. How long have you been doing this?
I'm horrible with dates and remembering things. I'm going to shoot for 6 years.
Okay.
Real quickly, I was actually in IT security for about almost 20 years or so. And I got burnt out on that corporate life. I just couldn't do it anymore. I ended up moving to the DC area, and that's where I ran into the person who became my partner, Sean Shanahan. He was actually my neighbor. And he was showing me the kind of stuff that he was doing with real estate photography and portraiture work. And I'd always been in photography my entire life, but I saw, okay, wait a minute, here's someone who's actually, earning a living from doing it. So that's how we hooked up. And then I started editing his stuff, and eventually got to the point to where I felt confident that I knew what I was doing. And so I started shooting my own stuff. I still do all of his editing, though. I think he and I work very well together. He will spend the day out shooting stuff, come home, dump the images or video onto his computers at his location, and then I copy all that stuff, and then I start my workday, which could, sometimes my work day with him might not start till 8 o'clock at night and end at 3 or 4 in the morning, depending on how busy of a day it was. I like the days where I'm not working quite that far. And of course, I do shoot all my stuff during the day, but it's worked really well for us. And he's been anywhere that I've anything that I've accomplished doing this real estate photography thing is definitely all been to him. He's an amazing photographer. And in fact, maybe we can reach out to him, maybe get him to come on and do this podcast, because the quality of his work is just amazing. I put him up there as one of the best real estate photographers that I've ever seen. And, we got a fairly big client that, we wouldn't have unless he was one of the best. So I'm lucky I've had him as a mentor for like I said, about 5 or 6 years. And that's about how long I've been doing it.
Okay. Well, I was going to say, used to, people would look for houses by going into the want ads and seeing, okay, there's a 3-bedroom, 2-bath, and look at the price. And from the price, and the neighborhood, and they could determine which house they wanted to look at. And now everything is done on the internet. So these photos and these videos mean so much more. At most of your steals, are they just for MLS, or are your agents doing special items with them?
So for the stuff that I'm shooting around in Virginia, most of that stuff ends up on MLS. The stuff that we're doing in Northern Virginia, depending on the property, sometimes those homes might get their own website. The bigger ones will definitely.
And that was one of the things I was going to ask about. I knew some.
We might get print work out of it potentially. So that stuff tends to be blown up a lot bigger. But then it brings up one other point of remembering. Real estate photography is one of those areas where the idea of who owns the photos is a little bit different. Typical portrait photographer takes the shots. He owns the copyright to those photos, and basically he gives them, he licenses them out to whomever. In real estate, you shoot the house and then you give everything to the agent and you let them run with it. I mean, I guess legally, probably the copyright remains with me, but I shoot the house and it's for this set price, and then they do whatever they need to do with it, whether they're running some print ads or whatever. But the images that I shoot are theirs to do whatever they need to. I'm not going to try a nickel and dime an agent to be like, oh, you want a print ad? Well, then you need this at this certain resolution. That's going to cost you $100 or whatever. No,
you and I both will get killed in the real estate photography community for doing that, because I'm the same way. The person hired me to get photos so they can market the house. I don't care how they market the house.
What am I going to do with a bunch of pictures of someone's house? I mean, I might throw some in my portfolio if they're really nice pictures, but I got no need for them, and the agents are happy if they want. Typically they want the lower resolution stuff for MLS, but if they want a full size resolution image, I'll give it to them. I won't give them a raw image, of course, because that's all the kind of work I do. There could potentially be 7 or 8 different images combined together with my final output. But I'm perfectly fine if they want a high resolution JPEG to print on a flyer or something. Absolutely, it's theirs to do with whatever they want.
Well, we are with Gerald Bertram of Bertram Photography, and I guess we're going to go into one of the final questions here, Gerald.
Sure.
We've had the Samsung Note 10 and Note 10 Plus come out. They have wide-angle cameras. Yep. We've had the iPhone 11 come out that's got a wide camera. I'm talking a 13-millimeter style camera, which is ideal for real estate.
Sure.
You were talking about you're getting used to gimbals. I mean, it's not that we're not far. We are there with the cell phone camera and a cheap $45, $50 gimbal. You've got the ability to do the shots and do the video. Now, the editing, somebody would have to learn. Do you think we're going to get to the point where, and I'm asking this as I know somebody in particular on the coast that shoots $1 million properties with a cell phone on a gimbal, and there's no questions asked. Do you think we're going to get to the point that...
This is a photographer doing this or an agent doing this?
This is a company that just does the photography and videography for it. And they do narration and stuff as well. Do you think we're getting close to the point where that may be acceptable?
We're getting close. The quality of image that's coming out of some of these newer cell phones is pretty amazing. But there is some physics involved in the inherent limits of a sensor that tiny. Eventually, you're going to start butting up against some problems with lower light homes. Now, I know there is some back-end technology stuff like the latest iPhones where they're doing multiple exposures as well and getting some fairly decent quality. I think for smaller homes, we're probably already there. The video that you shot with the Note was great. It looked, there was nothing wrong with that at all. For the higher end homes, I think that's still a number of years off. The technology's not there for me to be able to get a really nice, sharp, with perfect, accurate colors at the wide angle I need, which is a minimum of 16 millimeters. If I can get that down to 14, even better. Phones aren't quite there yet. They're not quite there yet, but I don't see, and I see no problem as long as it's a photographer that's doing the shooting. Whatever tool gets the job done, go for it. Unfortunately, there's a misunderstanding, I think, from some agents that think they got the latest phone, so the phone is the thing that takes great pictures. They don't need a photographer anymore, and they just walk through and take pictures. Well, if they sit and compare that to a photographer that knows what he's doing, even if that photographer has got a point and shoot, you're going to see a pretty big difference. The the education that's needed to shoot really good real estate, it's not vast, but it's there, and it's not something that most agents get into. I've known a couple who could take really good photos, but for the most part, they'll walk in with their cell phone, take a picture, and think that it's great. In fact, not too long ago, I think it was last summer, I had an agent that do that. They walked in, they said, "Oh, these pictures are great," and they sent them to me. I said, "Well, let me hop in there. Your images are beautiful. Let me show you what I can do." And, went in, shot the home, and got back there like, "Oh, wow, yeah, you're right. Those pictures weren't too hot that I took." But the technology is definitely evolving very quickly. I think we're not too far away. As long as it's the someone that really knows what they're doing. Equipment shouldn't matter to a certain extent.
Well, we're dealing with, in my area, and I know MLSs are different everywhere. My area, the maximum size is 3,000 by 2,000. That's 6 megapixels. Yep. The cell phone does double that, if not triple that, depending on the phone. Even with the front-facing camera.
Absolutely.
We shoot drone footage with Phantom 4s and Phantom 4 Pros, and these are not large files.
No, little 12 megapixel cameras.
And the dynamic range on a Phantom is horrible.
Yep. Yes, it is.
So if you shoot like high daylight and you've got harsh cloud or harsh shadows from trees.
Yep, forget about it.
You're going to have blown out and you're going to have black.
Time of day is critical if you're flying a drone, because you're not going to get any help in post with that with that image. There's not much you can do with it. So I know that you can shoot. Sometimes there's the little drone that I fly. I know I can get a 3 or 4 bracket JPEG exposure, or I can shoot a single RAW file. But even the RAW files, you don't have much room to push and pull with that. And if you're shooting video, which is essentially just JPEG, unless you nail that time of day, you're stuck with exactly what you saw. And
I mean, it's exactly right. But I do think that even with the newer cell phones that are out, and I'm guessing the Pixel's probably close. I've never dealt with the Google Pixel. LG's got a nice camera, from what I understand. In the hands of the right photographer, probably 90% of the homes, they can hit it out of the ballpark shots, I believe. And with the pro modes on Android and iOS, you can bracket if you want.
Yep, you could shoot RAW on them as well. I mean, like you said, in the hands of the right person. My partner Sean, I could be shooting with my full frame Sony gear and think I take an amazing shot, and he could come with a point and shoot and just make me look like trash. It's all about your experience, who's taking the photo. It's the equipment matters a whole lot less than the talent of the individual running the equipment.
Well, I'm gonna leave one thing about the equipment before we go. And
sure,
to me, mirrorless is nothing but a point and shoot.
You're Nikon, right?
I'm Nikon. I tell you what, though, I've been wanting to go to the Z6 for video because the iFocus is great. But this new D50 that's going to be half the price of the Z6 and a third the price of the Z7.
Yeah.
It only has one card, but it shoots 11 frames per second, which means in sports I can use it as a remote camera.
Yep.
And it has iFocus that, according to Jared Poland, Frono's Photo, the iFocus is spot on. So that may be where I'm headed, and instead of getting rid of my backup camera to get a Z6, I'll just add a third camera.
Well, see, with you doing so many different types, like with sports photography, your needs on a sports camera is night and day different than your needs for the camera that you're shooting real estate with.
Oh, my D850 is way overkill for real estate.
Oh yeah,
but there's no reason for me to have a D850 and a D750 or
right,
whatever.
Right. I mean, you can, especially for anyone who's just thinking about getting into doing real estate photography, you can 100% go pick up a Canon Rebel camera, not have to spend too much on that, pick up the Canon 10 to 18 lens, which is another, 200 used, maybe, or a little less. And you've got a great camera to shoot real estate with. The cost of entry to do real estate is not very high. It's when you need to start making those little bit of improvements to kind of take your photography up a couple of other notches is where you start getting into your more expensive stuff. But if you're just starting out as far as real estate, I mean, lights, everything under $1,000, and you can have a business up and running.
If you've got a decent body, something that can bracket. In fact, when I first started this business a little over 5 years ago, or a little under 5 years ago, I started with a D3400 or D3300, one or the other, and it could not bracket. And one of the clients that I landed required bracketing, and so I went and picked up a D200 for $150 that was used because it brackets. That was the only reason I purchased it. But that and get a wide angle lens.
Got to be, at least in my business, the minimum, well, you need to be able to get to 16 millimeter full frame equivalent. So that's 10 millimeters on APS-C and 8 millimeters on micro four thirds, which there are plenty of lenses for both those systems that do that. You could probably get away with something maybe not quite as wide. It's just been in my experience, the realtors that I'm dealing with, they want wide, really wide. And so occasionally I might even, get out a 14 mil lens depending. But it's not that expensive to even get one of those super wide lenses. Now, it's not going to be Canon L glass quality stuff, but certainly,
for MLS, it really don't matter.
Yeah, I mean, remember,
for the most part,
the majority of the images that you shoot, especially when you're starting out, and even for a lot of the stuff for me, is going to end up in that, would you say, 2,000 by 3,000 small image on a website. You don't need to have the best quality image for that. And
probably won't even see it on the laptop. You'll probably see it on a
phone,
5-inch cell phone.
100%. You don't need crazy resolution for this job. Hopefully you get going with that stuff and then you get the kind of jobs where you do need that beefier equipment. That's, that should kind of be your end goal. But to start out and to do a really decent job in this industry, you don't need a massive investment of equipment.
You can start off with $1,000. I mean, a Rokinon, 14 millimeter, I think is about a couple of $160.
Yep. And
a good sturdy tripod.
That's important, by the way.
I used, you mentioned you were using Godox. I use Yongnuo's. My triggers are 2 for $40 off eBay. I mean, worst case, you use a timer on the camera. So
absolutely,
it's an easy business to get into. It's a hard business to stay in.
It is. It's a lot of photographers that I know. What's a politically correct way of saying this? Are not the most pleasant people. And so they should never get into real estate. And granted, most of them are like portrait photographers, or they're corporate photography, something a little bit different than this field. More important than your equipment is your personality. If you're not a nice, likable person, you will 100% fail in real estate, like we talked about before. It's all about that relationship that you end up having with the agents. You've got to be a friendly guy, and your winning personality will beat out your crappy equipment any day of the week.
And I think that's a great thing to end on.
Crappy equipment.
Just be nice. Be nice, and the world is your oyster.
Yeah, don't be a jerk, man. Just be nice to people, and know what you're doing. Yeah, be nice and be nice. Good,
exactly. Good
for whatever you've got in life, man. Just be a nice person.
Well, thank you, Gerald, for coming on today. Again, we're with Gerald Bertram of I'm trying to say it again, Gerald. I'm sorry, of BertramPhotography.com. You can find him on Instagram at Bertram_photo, or on Facebook at Bertram Photography. He's in the Central Virginia area near Richmond, and also services the greater DC area. I would.
Good way to say it. Absolutely, man. Definitely. Got to do that. That would have been awesome, man. I'd have been up for that. I would have been up for that. Yeah.
Why you be all on my line about nothing? Why won't you go get you $1 or something? Something. Get you $1 or something. Why you be all on my line about nothing? Why won't you go get you $1 or something? Something. Get you $1 or something. Something.